Welcome to the Simply Vegan podcast, brought to you by the team at Vegan Food and Living, the UK's best-selling vegan magazine. If you're new to the podcast, I'm the magazine editor, Holly Johnson, and my co-host, Molly Pickering, is our digital executive. We've both been vegan around 5 years and love bringing you all the latest news, reviews, and vegan chat every week. Today is the second episode in our cookery series, and Molly and I are chatting to vegan chef Bettina Campolucci Bordi about baking. If you missed last week's show with the happy pair, make sure you go back and have a listen. It really will transform your cooking. And just quickly, before we get started, don't forget you can hear more from us and stay up to date with podcast news by signing up to our newsletter at veganfoodandliving.com/welcome. And you can also try an issue of Vegan Food and Living magazine for just 99p at veganfoodandliving.com/podcast. Bettina, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to see you. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So you're a podcaster yourself, aren't you? You have done, was it one series you've done so far with Nikki Webster, What the Focaccia?
We've done 3.
Oh, have you? Oh my goodness, I'm behind the times.
We've done 3 series and actually hoping to do a 4th, finding out if we have a sponsor tomorrow, fingers crossed.
Amazing.
Amazing. So yeah, hoping to do another season. Let's see.
Yeah. So tell us where it all started then. How did you get into vegan cooking?
Oh my gosh. I got into vegan cooking about 10 years ago. I was living in southern Spain. So I lived in southern Spain for 12 years in total. It's where I did my last year of uni. I met my husband. I kind of got stuck there, wasn't meant to stay, ended up staying for 12 years and started running wellness retreats and decided that I also wanted to cook on them because cooking has been a lifelong passion. And it was an opportunity to sort of do what I've always wanted to do, but never really did, because I was always front of house within the food and beverage industry, but front of house, and started cooking plant-based, AKA vegan food, and also gluten-free, which was very niche-y 10 years ago, and absolutely loved it. First retreat went really well, and I sort of banana slid into the wellness industry, and then obviously vegan became a thing. So right time and right place, and then started doing recipe development for brands, cookbooks, and yeah, I've got my hands stuck in a lot of pots basically. Yeah. within the plant-based world.
Lots of vegan pies. I mean,
pies.
Running wellness retreats and cooking vegan food just sounds like the best job in the world. And you were in Spain as well doing that.
I was in Spain doing that for my first sort of 4 years. And then the retreat industry is one of those things. It's how I started. And I tend to jump out of it and go, I'm not doing that anymore. And then I get pulled and roped right back in. So I still run retreats. I do one in Bali every year. Obviously, with what's been going on in the last 2 years, that's not really been possible. But hopefully, fingers crossed, next March. And then I also freelance on retreats, especially with one company called Reclaim Yourself, that do retreats in weird and wonderful, amazing, incredible places like Mongolia and Ecuador. And
oh my goodness.
Hopefully going to India in October, so we'll see. But I don't do as many as I used to. And now I run this cookery school called a Retreat Chef Academy, where I teach people how to become retreat chefs. I just finished one last week, which was great. First one for this year.
Amazing. I think we need to go on this course, Molly.
I think we do as well. India in October. That sounds amazing. Such a good time to go.
Yes. We're going to 3 locations, and the company I'm working with, Reclaim Yourself, they do sustainable travel. So it's all slow train journeys from sort of 3 different areas that we're going to be in. So starting in Rajasthan, then going to the Himalayas, and then ending up in Goa on the beach.
Oh my goodness me, that's so good.
I'm just thinking, if you need any assistance, perhaps we could help.
People seem to be really willing to offer their help.
Yeah.
Anything you need, give us a shout.
What that is all about.
Well, we're going to focus on baking today, aren't we? Because it's kind of one of your fortes. Obviously, you have. Just looking at the recipes on your website, you obviously have a huge repertoire. But baking is one thing, especially gluten-free baking, is something that you. Yes. Obviously enjoy. So should we start with egg replacements? Because I think it's the first thing that people kind of go, what? You're making a cake with no egg in it. How's that going to work? How's it going to rise? I know my mum, finds it very confusing indeed.
I was just about to say my mum as well. She just has no idea. I tell her about like flaxseed egg and she's just like, what is that?
So there's kind of a mind-boggling amount of things that you can use as replacement for egg, isn't there? There's flaxseed, there's aquafaba, which is the juice from a tin of chickpeas. There's apple sauce, mashed banana, silken tofu. How on earth do you know what to use in what kind of different, thing that you're baking?
I suppose. It depends on a lot of different factors, but you've literally sort of named all the egg replacements. I think it depends on what type of flours you're using. If you're going to go with gluten-free, you're going to need something that's more sort of juicy and brings in moisture to your cake or whatever you're baking. If you're baking sweet or savory, again, it completely depends. I think I've got, my latest book, Celebrates, I'm using a lot of aquafaba. Book plug.
Right.
Love that. Plug away.
By the way, there's a lot of cake recipes here. So interestingly enough, in terms of baking, I decided halfway through writing my latest cookbook that I was going to use flour again, because my first two cookbooks are vegan and gluten-free. And it was really, really interesting because I thought, easy. I'll just start using flour again. Haven't really cooked with flour for the last 6 to 7 years, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Well, it is very, very different when you've worked with gluten-free flours for a while and then you're working with flour. So different flours absorb different amounts of moisture. And I would say aquafaba is fantastic. I've used that a lot in both gluten-free and sort of normal flour baking. I also find that flax seeds work really well. However, flax seeds need to be ground.
This is my issue. I always kind of lead them a bit sort of, I don't know, grainy.
Yeah, you need to grind them properly. And it's one tablespoon, and, not a proper tablespoon, not like a tablespoon with 2 tablespoons of water, and then you make you've got to sort of like aerate it, and it will be, and if you use nut milk, it becomes creamier as well. So that's a really good egg replacement, and chia seeds as well. Again, much better if you grind them. But then equally, things like apple puree work really well. Things like sweet potato puree works really well. I also find that carrot puree works really well. It's
there's so many. I made some brownies not too long ago, actually. I must confess, I'm a terrible baker. Vegan baking is just not my forte. I think, as you were saying about sort of like the heap teaspoons, that it's me. Like I really struggle following the ingredients to what they're meant to be. So I'm working on it. We're getting there. But I made some brownies with sweet potato, and they were the best brownies I've ever eaten in my life.
Yeah, sweet potato is really good. And you know what? I like baking. I'm not sort of the scientific type of baker. I'm the type of baker that boshes everything into a blender.
Love that.
Blender cake. Who doesn't love a blender cake? It's just
I am down with that.
So a lot of my baking is kind of like that. And when you work in a retreat chefing environment, you're limited in terms of the equipment that you've got. And a blender cake always saves the day because you can kind of put it anywhere.
Yeah, it saves the day in more ways than one.
I agree. Sweet potato brownies. Amazing.
Yummy. So a blender cake, is that presumably chucking all the ingredients into the blender, mixing it up, and then you kind of put it like a tray bake type thing?
Yes. Yeah. Lots of my cake recipes are exactly that. And obviously you can't eyeball the amounts of ingredients, but if you just chuck everything into the blender, whiz it up so that it's a nice and smooth texture, you're actually going to be fine.
Yeah. So in terms of like whisking, a lot of recipes, like the egg kind of, do you need to whisk longer with vegan baking to kind of get more air into things? That's something I've read. Again, I am rubbish at baking, so you
this
literally
is a class for us.
I know. Yeah.
Well, it depends. I mean, with sort of plant butter and stuff like that, if you want to get it nice and creamy, obviously with sort of a handheld blender, that works really well. I love a handheld blender. I don't have a KitchenAid or anything like that, even though I do a lot of recipe development. In terms of aquafaba, this is a tricky one. That needs time. I mean, put a good Netflix series on while you're whisking your aquafaba, because it takes a good 10 to 15 minutes. You're stood there.
Oh, wow. That is a long time.
Yeah.
Even with the electric whisk, the handheld whisk.
10 to 15 minutes. And actually, this is a really good trick. If you squeeze a little bit of lemon juice into the aquafaba, it sort of helps it keep its shape. But it takes a good 10 to 15 minutes to whisk it up. And a good trick is to just take the bowl and do that.
Over your head. That always scares me.
It sounds like you're going to get severe arm ache doing that. You definitely need a KitchenAid.
KitchenAid, anything like that. But no, a good old handheld whisk is fine.
So what about Yorkshire puddings? Because Molly and I are sort of more into savoury, aren't we? And I have made Yorkshire puddings before using a Gaz Oakley recipe, but you just don't get the rise on them, do you? Can you
Yorkshire puddles? That's what I have. Yorkshire puddles.
You know what? I've not mastered a Yorkshire pud.
Really?
Why are they so hard? I
have to say, it's just, it's not something that I've done, unfortunately. I reckon it's a good thing to try out and experiment with. That might be my next challenge. I get asked that question a lot, especially since moving to the UK. So I guess we can officially say that I'm challenged. I'll do something about that.
Please. We need it.
We've set you the challenge. We want to see the recipe and the results on Instagram, please.
Great. Okay. Challenge accepted.
Another thing that my mum says a lot is that, a lot of baking sort of sweet dessert recipes and vegan cakes are really high in sugar and fat, and actually, they're not healthier. Whereas, a lot of us are going vegan for health reasons these days. So, why do they seem to contain more sugar? Is it to sort of add in that extra flavour when you're taking out things like the dairy and the eggs? And what can we use to?
I completely disagree. I think if you're making your own cakes and sweets at home, you're sort of in control of what goes into your pot, and you definitely don't need to add. I don't find that you need to add loads of sugar and fat to make a cake delicious. I mean, from a packaging point of view and what's being sold into shops, that might be the case. But if you're making a cake at home from scratch, there is no need to add more fat or sugar at all. You don't need to do that.
Okay.
So yeah, I would disagree.
Right.
And especially with the homemade stuff. And with everything that is sort of that comes from a shop, regardless if it's vegan or not, it can be high in sugar and fat.
Yeah, very
definitely
true.
I suppose as well with there's lots of sort of natural sugars that you can use, like agave and sort of all of that other stuff, so you don't actually have to be relying on conventional sugar. And vegan butter as well, you can be, I think it's lesser in fat anyway, so
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? You don't just you can also use things like odorless coconut oil or just normal coconut oil. You can use things like grapeseed oil. I've made delicious cakes with olive oil, actually. There's a olive oil and pear cake on my blog, which is delicious. And it's using a really good fat and not that much sugar. And I tend to sort of let the fruit do the talking. So if you're covering your cake in beautiful sliced pears that are sliced slightly softer, or if you're filling your banana bread with your scrimply old brown bananas that are hiding in a corner waiting to be put into banana bread, the browner your bananas, the sweeter they are. So utilizing and using all your ingredients to their best abilities is, I think, the way to go. And using seasonal produce, like strawberries are in season at the moment, and you don't need much addition to sort of make a delicious treat or dessert or anything that's baked when you've got really sweet strawberries, for example, or any type of fruit.
My favorite puddings are the sort of fruitier ones. I think recently in sort of vegan confectioneries and sweets and stuff, it's all salted caramel or just sort of chocolate flavored. Where is the fruit? Like, I love all of those fruity flavors. Where are they?
I do as well. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
You're quite big on kind of seasonal eating, aren't you? I know you were sort of chatting about it on your podcast. It's sort of a recurring theme.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, eating seasonally is better for us. We get more of the nutrients out of the fruit and veg, and it tastes better. Where do you tend to source all your ingredients from?
It completely depends. I think farmers markets. I've got a really good farmers market here on Saturdays where I live. I tend to, obviously, because of what I do, I get sent a lot of produce that is in season. So recently I've been sent asparagus, peppers, aubergines, and tomatoes are coming into season. Watercress is another one. That's really good. And in terms of seasonal eating, this is the start of many good things to come in the UK for at least a good sort of 5 to 6 months. So in terms of sort of stocking up on abundance, this is the time to be going to your farmers markets. And, even in shops, you'll find things that are in season and that are British. And it's the time to sort of overeat on asparagus.
Oh, definitely.
so that you can wait a whole year to have them again. Things like strawberries and berries and peppers, like all of those things are going to taste so much better now. And it's a good way of looking forward to things as well in terms of seasonality. So, and it tends to be priced. And I know that a lot of people think that eating plant-based can be more expensive. But I tend to disagree with that as well. I think that there's a lot of choice in terms of seasonal and local veg boxes that are either organic or non-organic, and a big box for a family will cost £30 a week. And I always sort of liken it in the way that if you go down the pub, you will spend 30 quid this quickly within an hour, and you will have drunk a couple of drinks, whereas you can get a full box of seasonal local grown vegetables that will last you for a week. So yeah, it's not, that's the easiest way, I think, to incorporate sort of that aspect into your life, and makes you cook with things that you might not buy normally, but that will taste great.
Yeah. Definitely. I sort of use the Riverford box, and I find it I do feel like you save money in a way because you're not constantly going to the supermarket. You've got your staples there and you've got your tins and things in the cupboard, and it's just kind of working out what you can make with what's in the box. And I do find it works for us anyway. So you mentioned cooking without flour. Can you still sort of bake gluten-free things with flour? Just obviously not your sort of standard white sort of plain flour, whatever you get from the supermarket.
Sorry, what do you mean? If you can bake with or without flour, or with gluten-free flour?
So which flours are gluten-free?
That's a good question. So which flours are gluten-free? Loads of flours are gluten-free. My favorite flours are gram flour, also known as chickpea flour, buckwheat flour, rice flour, corn flour, millet flour, oat flour. I mean, there's so many different ones. But I would say my 3 sort of top gluten-free flours are probably buckwheat, gram, and rice flour that I use the most. And then in terms of flours containing gluten, you've obviously got white flour, spelt, rye, brown wholemeal flour. All of those flours contain gluten. Ancient grains like spelt and rye contain less gluten. And there's quinoa flour as well. And actually quinoa and buckwheat are seeds and not grains. So to confuse you even more.
Why were you cooking without flour then? What's the sort of benefits of that?
In terms of when I started cooking on retreats, it was really popular to do juice detoxes at the time. And I co-founded the retreats and obviously started cooking on them. And we chose to do vegan food and gluten-free because we wanted people to eat food. And not juice, and sort of showcase what a varied diet you can have being vegan and gluten-free. And that also sort of challenged me to work with different types of flours, different types of ingredients. Because we started them in southern Spain, I went to farmers markets and sourced all my produce seasonally and locally because it was the cheapest and tastiest way of sourcing food. And that's sort of been the backbone of the type of cooking that I do ever since. So it was purely sort of a rule that I started with because of my business partner at the time. And then I kind of stuck with it because I thought it was much more interesting than cooking with flour. And obviously with people coming on the retreats and being inspired and having transformations, the whole point was to, rather than have the attitude of this is what you can't have during a week, I wanted to showcase this is what you can have and these are the options. There isn't just one flour, there's 15 different flours and this is how you can use them. There's not one type of tomato, there's lots of variety. And it's I always use the example of rice. There's a few varieties of rice available, but there's actually 600 different varieties.
Wow.
More than 600 different types of varieties of rice. Like a simple thing like that is mind-blowing, and that's just one thing. So you can imagine with all the things, all the ingredients around the world, there's so many options, which is exciting. It's still exciting because you always discover something new.
It's crazy, isn't it? There's been a lot in the press, hasn't there, about, we need to sort of tap into like the problem with the wheat in Ukraine. We're not using half the resources that we could be. And there's grains in, say, Africa that they eat a lot that we're not, we've never even heard of. So I think, over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, we will see a lot of change in that kind of area.
Yeah, definitely.
I think as well, like Western supermarkets, they are so limited in what they stock. And as you said, there's such a range of, as you say, from rice to flour. Like I sort of go gluten-free, like sort of now and again. And just sort of even from the little bits that I do, you can just sort of play about with ingredients, like blending up oats and just using that as flour. It's just simple things like that is just so easy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about variety, and I think most importantly, it's to support soil health. If there's anything that we should be doing collectively, if you're a vegan or not vegan, whatever label you're under, is to preserve the soil and the variety of what we're growing at the moment, and that is true sustainability, and it's something that we should all collectively be doing, because we will run out of harvests and top layers of our soil if we're not careful. And we're talking years, not hundreds of years, years down the line.
Yeah, it's pretty scary stuff, isn't it?
Definitely something that we all need to do something about, which is why it's important where we get our food from and where we sort of put our support and purchasing power.
Yeah. So what would be your kind of foolproof vegan cake recipe? Perhaps a seasonal one that's really good to, sort of utilizing lovely summer fruits that we've got available right now.
That's a good question. I think a good sponge. I mean, you can fill a good sponge with anything. Obviously, it's the Jubilee next week, so I'm thinking sponge, cream, and strawberries.
Classic.
Yeah, I mean, you can just top that up with anything that's in season, but at the moment, strawberries are pretty hot.
Yeah.
So that would be my go-to. There's a gluten-free recipe and a gluten recipe, I think, lurking around on my website, and in my books. So yeah, always good sponge. You can just vary that with anything.
Yeah. What cream do you use then? Do you use like a particular supermarket brand?
Yes. You can make your own cream, but I use a particular supermarket brand.
Which one?
I'm not sponsored by.
You can tell us.
You can tell us.
Sponsor me. I use Oatly. So they've got and maybe I'm biased because I did grow up in Sweden. So I lived in Sweden from the age of 11 to my early 20s. And I'm partly Scandi. Scandi people do things well, by the way.
They do.
Little side note. They do a vanilla whippable cream. And they also do like a white cream that's whippable. It's really good.
Yeah.
I know.
I like Oatly.
Yeah, I'm biased, but it's the one I use.
It's just so easy, isn't it? And just it's everywhere you go, you can just grab a pack. I don't think I've ever thought about making my own cream. That sounds like such a mission. I'll just pick up some Oatly. It's fine. Other brands are available, of course.
I also think that, people that cook with normal cream, it's like you would never dream of telling a chef, oh, do you not make your own cream? So like, why would you go and buy a really good cream from the shop? It's like exactly the same thing. You wouldn't even question it.
Yeah. I see that going back to, we were talking about Nikki, who you did What the Focaccia podcast with. I see she's created a Jubilee trifle, which again is quite heavily laden with cream and strawberries. It looks really good.
I love a trifle. The best dessert, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is the best dessert. Yes, I saw that. It's great. I love a trifle. I love custard.
Me too.
Love custard. It's like my thing.
Thank you so much, Bettina. You've been amazing. It's been we've certainly got some tips in there, Molly, so we can actually, we've got no excuse now. And we'll keep an eye out for that Yorkshire pudding recipe so we can perfect that as well for our Sunday roast dinners.
Yes. Oh my gosh, no pressure. Thank you so much for having me. Really good fun. And if anybody needs any baking tips, obviously you can find me on Bettina's Kitchen on Instagram and on my website. And let me know how you get on with your baking.
We will.
Thank you so much.
So we can all be vegan baking pros now, like Bettina. If you have any of your own baking tips to share, you can email simplyvegan@anthem.co.uk and we'll share them on our next episode. Be fantastic to hear them. Next week, Molly and I are back on Thursday and we're chatting to Katie Bescow. She's an author of numerous cookbooks and she's all about cooking with just a few ingredients. So we're going to get loads of tips for just, whacking a few ingredients in a pan and creating an amazing vegan meal. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next week.